This is Access Ann Arbor.
I'm Libby Hunter, the moderator for this program, focusing on news in the local media. Kathy Griswold and Bob Rourke join me. Kathy is a longtime pedestrian safety advocate, and Bob is a consultant. They did serve together on the Ann Arbor Public Schools Board of Education during the early 2000s, and now they serve on the editorial board of a fairly new locally owned paper called the Ann Arbor Independent. I actually have a copy here. That is our new local paper. It's a weekly, the Ann Arbor Independent. In fact, it's the first locally owned print media since the year 1902. Before we begin our discussion, I want to announce the Ann Arbor Independent's high school essay contest. You see here. This is, I'll say the prize is right away. First prize is $200, second prize is $100, and the third prize is $50. It's open to all students enrolled in grades 9 to 12 in public, private, and home schools within the city of Ann Arbor. The topic that should be written about is the importance of independent media. Essays must be entered by December 20th. Winning essays of 500 to 1,000 words will be published in the December 24th issue of this paper, The Independent. Email essays to editor@a2indy.com. So this evening, for the next 20 minutes or so, we will be reviewing two topics in recent issues of the Ann Arbor Independent, and they are about the Ann Arbor District Library and the need for a state crosswalk law in Michigan. First, the library discussion. In November of 2012, voters defeated a bond ballot for a new downtown library by a margin of 55% to 45%. In January of 2013, the Protect Our Libraries Political Action Committee hired Bob Rourke to review library operations and suggest possible options for the library's future. So now I'd like to ask Bob, who's sitting to my right, can you tell us the major points that you reported to the Political Action Committee regarding the present status of the library?
Well, first, Libby, the library is a very well-managed operation. Its revenue over the last few years, because of the decline in property taxes in the Ann Arbor area, fell from $16 million to $12 million. And despite this fall off in revenue of 25%, the library has continued to operate and satisfy the needs of its patrons. So the first thing I'd say it's very well managed. The second thing I'd say is that the staff is exceptional. I got to interview a great number of people, particularly people on the management team, and I find them to be very creative, very enthusiastic, and people of good competence. It's a good group of people that are running the operation here in Ann Arbor. The third thing I'd say is that the patrons, the citizens of Ann Arbor, are happy with the library. The board did a survey with Epic MRA prior to putting the bond on the ballot, and the public was overwhelmingly positive about the service they got from the library and the employees of the library, and also what the library was doing for them in terms of running programs, but particularly in terms of being a depository for books, CDs, and DVDs.
Right.
And that's changed somewhat in terms of over the last few years. Books still are the #1 thing that is taken out of the library, but DVDs, particularly with the loss of Blockbuster and other stores like that, has become a major part of the library lending. So the people are happy with the library. The big problem with the library right now is that it's going through a big transition, as are all libraries across the country, because we're going from print to digital. And because of that, the normal function of the library, the two normal functions, one of being a reference source and two being a lending source for physical materials, has now started to wane. I can see that in my own family. I still go to the library to get books and DVDs. My kids haven't gone anywhere near the place. They use their computer for their music. They use their computer to watch movies. They use their computer to read books, articles, etc. And if they want to do reference work, when I was in school, we went to the library to the card catalog or asked the reference librarian for help. They Google, use Wikipedia, whatever sources are available. So the thing has changed measurably, and the library here is making a real effort to adapt to that change, and they're trying a lot of different things. One is doing different types of events, and also running programs that are non-traditional library things, which might be hosting gaming like Warcraft on some of their servers, or running Lego competitions. So that's the nature of their response to this change.
Well, I was going to ask next, and I'm not sure this is a great question for right now, but what will the Library of the Future do? Have you sort of already answered that?
Well, the answer to that is who knows? Nobody knows. The digital world, the libraries have been somewhat shut out of, because the producers, the publishers, the artists, whether they be writers or musicians, are going direct to the consumer. And the idea of giving a digital copy to the library and letting them lend it out 1,000 times over in the first week is not going to happen, because that's not the template of what the model is today.
Right.
So the model is broken in terms of lending. That the producers, if they come out with an e-book, will allow you to have the e-book, but the e-book has to be returned to the library before somebody else takes it out, and that pretty much precludes the type of lending. The same thing with streaming of DVDs and things like that. So there is a real effort nationally to try to find another use. We talked about some of the programming and outreach that the library is doing. Part of the thing was to try to, have more meetings there, and also be sort of a focus for the community.
Okay. Next question would be, why then would the library trustees and administration want a new building?
And that's another question I can't answer. It might have been on their bucket list. I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense at this point in time. They have a collection of worth about $16 million. The library spends about $1.8 million a year acquiring new materials out of the $12 million they now spend annually. there isn't anybody who can tell you what the library is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. As I get older, and my generation gets older, there'll be less people going there to borrow books and DVDs. My son's generation will take over, and unless they're somehow attracted to the library for new reasons, I think the use of the library will fall off. Yeah. And so the idea of building a building in the first place that you're going to pay for 30 years with no idea what you're going to have in that building 5, 10, or 20 years from now doesn't make much sense. The building they have, you can argue is not as functional as they would like it to be, yet it is functional enough to maintain the library as it is and meet the needs of the patrons. And the patrons are happy with it. They have branches that are well used. Mallets, Traver wood are very heavily used, as is Pittsfield to an extent, and the rental that they have out in West Side. And the idea in the future may be that you want more branches or more ability for people to get there. I don't think it's as easy to get downtown. Parking is more expensive today than it has been. And so the idea, particularly for people who are poorer, is that you may want to have smaller satellite branches where they had computer access, which is another new feature that the library has in terms of having a lot of computers available so people can surf the web and get information.
Yeah, we used to have the bookmobile that would go to different communities, especially low-income communities, and we don't have anything like that. And so I think some satellite branches, even if they were only open, say, a couple of evenings a week, would meet that need.
Makes sense. Will the board of the Ann Arbor District Library continue to push for a new building?
Indications are that they will. The PAC FOIA information regarding the hiring of Allerton Hill, which was a consultant, basically a political consultant that was responsible for ballot proposals, villages, etc., based primarily in Ohio. They took a contract with Allerton Hill, and the emails we got indicated that many of the board members were still interested, and the administration was still interested in pushing for a new building.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. As a former Ann Arbor School Board trustee, you have been in the position to deal with the public quite a bit. Why do you think that there is a lack of transparency in dealing with the Ann Arbor District Library and these issues? And you have to FOIA things.
I think the basic reason is until this bond issue came up in November of 2012, the board of the Ann Arbor Library and the actions of the library sort of were under the radar for the community. And now that it's not under the radar, it's open there. They're still operating the way they used to operate, which is the committee meetings are closed. Though it's legal, it's not the way things are done in most Ann Arbor institutions. The information that's reported at the meetings, the discussions that go back and forth from the meeting are very limited. So I think people were used to, and most people have been on the board, have been there a long time, they're used to doing it a certain way, and they've had a hard time adapting to the fact that they're now in the spotlight.
My last question for you is, looking to November 2014, this is two questions. Do you see another bond ballot, and will there be competition for the election of new trustees of the district library?
I think it's quite possible and even probable that there'll be another bond put forward to the voters in November of 2014. I think the hiring of Allerton Hill was a good example or a good indication that was going to happen. On the other hand, in terms of the election of trustees, I think there are going to be people that will come out, particularly from the PAC, to run for the board because they have gathered a lot of information. They understand the library now, and they're going to be interested in trying to support the change but not encumber the library with a new building.
Okay, thanks for your expertise and all the work that you've done. That was Bob Rourke. Now we'll go to Kathy Griswold and discuss the crosswalks and the need for a state law. Kathy, why do you support a state crosswalk law?
I have been advocating for a state crosswalk law because it would provide uniformity across the state. It's also best practice. Many other states have crosswalk laws. Two examples that are similar to us, Illinois and Florida. Florida is a tourist state. They have crosswalk laws that say stop for pedestrian within the crosswalk. So in Michigan, our uniform traffic code simply states yield. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's a yield rather than a stop within the crosswalk. And this uniform code is recommended by the state police, but it's not the law. And so it allows local municipalities to adopt their own local ordinances, and then we have inconsistencies across the state. I received some really great news just a few hours ago. As a result of my state crosswalk law petition on change.org, and the easiest way to access that is to go to seekids.org. You can see the picture of the website here. And I think the second line there mentions the change.org petition. The good news was from Representative Jeff Irwin, and he responded, "Thank you for contacting me to support a statewide crosswalk law for Michigan. I agree that a uniform standard would be best for protecting the safety of all road users. If the rules are the same from town to town, everyone will know what to expect of each other. Enacting a state-level crosswalk law will also provide an opportunity for us to implement," and this is really important, "pedestrian safety improvements for the entire state. Improving safety for pedestrians would not only prevent accidents, it would also encourage people to walk more with benefits for the environment, physical fitness, and neighborhoods." So anyway, I was really thrilled to get this just hours ago.
That's great news. What is your history of pedestrian safety advocacy?
I started advocating for pedestrians in about 1995 when I found out that my children would be walking to the elementary school and there were two properties without sidewalks, and so the children would have to walk in the road. I went to then Mayor Sheldon and requested that a sidewalk be put in, and from the time I made that request until the sidewalk was constructed was less than a year. And it was a very straightforward process, and I felt that that City Hall listened to me and did what was best for the community. I then joined the Ann Arbor Transportation Safety Committee. I served on that for 15 years until just a few years ago. And an example of another pedestrian safety improvement is that there was a request for a sidewalk in the King School area again, so that the crosswalk could be moved from mid-block right in front of the school to about 250 feet away to a four-way stop. The request was analyzed by the Transportation Safety Committee that included education professionals, a professional engineer with traffic engineering expertise, someone from the police department. In 2009, they recommended that the crosswalk be moved and that the sidewalk be constructed. That's been 4 years now, and that hasn't happened, and it's become a very bureaucratic process. And so I'm continuing to advocate for more pedestrian infrastructure improvements in the capital improvement plan. And at the last council meeting on Monday night, there was a discussion about funding pedestrian infrastructure. In fact, I don't remember a council member even using the term pedestrian infrastructure until just recently. So I'm very optimistic that we will have improvements throughout the community.
Ann Arbor has a local crosswalk law. It was enacted in 2010, and you have opposed it since it was enacted. Why is that?
I opposed it because I thought it was really trying to solve the wrong problem, and it was doing it, I hate to say this, but on the cheap. What happens when you're trying to cross the road at a crosswalk, if you feel like you have to wait an excessive amount of time, and that really depends on the person's perspective, then you contact the city, and the first thing that's done is a professional engineer will go out and they will do what's called a gap analysis. And they measure the traffic, the vehicular traffic, and determine if there are gaps in the traffic that allow a pedestrian to safely cross the street. And if those gaps occur frequently enough that a person does not have to wait an excessive amount of time. If that's not the case, then they find engineering infrastructure improvements. A good example of that would be that if you're trying to cross a 2-lane street and there are not adequate gaps, then there might be a pedestrian island put in, and we have many of those around Ann Arbor. So that way you only need a gap in traffic going in one direction to safely cross half of the road, and then you could have a gap going the rest of the way and safely cross the road with no conflict with vehicular traffic. Was that a complete answer?
Yeah,
okay. I know this gets very complicated and technical, but that's why we have professional engineers involved.
Yeah, it's a good explanation. City Council voted to amend the local ordinance this week, December 2nd, on Monday.
They did, to make it consistent with best practices, and again, using that stop within a crosswalk law that is similar to Illinois, Florida, and many other states.
Well, it made it consistent with Traverse City.
Yes, Traverse City also adopted a local ordinance recently that was similar to the Ann Arbor ordinance, but in Ann Arbor we include stopping for a pedestrian at the curb or curb ramp. I talked to a number of people in Traverse City, including an engineer and a council member, and they decided not to adopt that language that would include the curb area. And the implementation of this ordinance was very different than in Ann Arbor. They started out with just 6 intersections in Ann Arbor where they put signage up, and they're going to slowly adopt it with a lot of feedback and evaluation of how it's going.
Now, you support the amendment, obviously.
I support the amendment. The amendment is still slightly different than a state crosswalk law, and so long-term what we need is a state crosswalk law so that we have uniformity across the state.
So you can drive anywhere and it's going to, no confusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as a pedestrian advocate, I'm not going to recommend language because I think it's very important that we have professional engineers from the Michigan Department of Transportation look at the different conditions throughout the state and determine what the best law would be for the entire state, not necessarily just for an urban area or a rural area, but we need to agree upon something that's going to be appropriate for the state.
Yeah. Let's see, Ann Arbor's Mayor Heftia has promised to veto this amendment. Why and what's next?
I find it very troubling that the mayor would veto a resolution that was passed by the majority of council, but really the mayor has been vetoing pedestrian safety improvements for 5 or 6 years. Not in terms of a veto at council, but in terms of the direction that he's given to the city staff. In fact, the professional engineers were not involved in, nor did they approve the local ordinance language. They were sort of bypassed in that process. And so I feel like the mayor has been at odds with best practices and with the professionals for many years. He sent an email out today, or maybe it was yesterday, and I'll just read one line. And this is a response to someone who thanked him for upholding the local pedestrian ordinance. And the mayor writes, with the recession now in the rearview mirror, the city should be able to stretch a bit on signage, engineering, and enforcement. Now, I don't think that we should be stretching anything. I think that we should have strategic objectives which include pedestrian safety, and we should have a formal process for achieving those that include professional engineers, community advocates, and it should be a collaborative process with our surrounding communities. Right now we have a local ordinance that applies to Ann Arbor. It does not apply to the University of Michigan property. They still follow the Michigan Uniform Traffic Code. And even more troubling, the Ann Arbor Public Schools, they follow the AAA School Safety Patrol guidelines, which state that children should not cross the road until traffic is clear. So we sort of have this conflict in Ann Arbor. We seem very focused on getting our way in Ann Arbor, and I don't think that's the way to do anything. I think that collaboration is very important, especially with the local schools.
I might add, I drive Plymouth Road daily, and since the new law was put in 2010, it's a disaster out there. You come up to crosswalk, the thing is flashing. I stopped somebody behind me, it's still barreling ahead, and then has to throw their brakes on. The person next to me drives right straight through the crosswalk, and so there's no, it's chaos. And the idea that people in Ann Arbor will finally get it, forgets the idea that other people are on the road in Ann Arbor that are not citizens of Ann Arbor or the surrounding community, or even might be traveling from out of state. It just doesn't make any sense at all, and it isn't working.
And I'd like
We
to
only
add
have like a minute or two.
Oh, okay. I'd just like to add that another best practice is to always focus on safety and work collaboratively. The standard campaign is share the road, but in Ann Arbor, instead of sharing the road, we came out with, this is an enlarged version of a bookmark, but it says pedestrians rule in Ann Arbor, and I think that that has created some tension between pedestrians and drivers, and that would not have happened if we had used something that, this is what's recommended by the U.S. Department of Transportation, which focuses on safety and sharing the road.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone for watching. We encourage you to get more involved in your community and stay informed with all of the local news sources. The Ann Arbor Independent, CTN local programs, Ann Arbor Chronicle, a locally owned online publication, WEMU Radio has some coverage of City Council, then the County Commission and the school board meetings. The new Ann Arbor Independent is published once a week, and information may be found at a2indy.com. We look forward to hearing from you at editor@a2indy.com. Also, we encourage high school students to enter the essay contest with prizes up to $200. Please see a2indy.com for more information. Thank you very much.